shooting, say by members on the OIS investigation, typically ask them to only do periphery type. The other agency investigation work. The idea, once they're done with that report, and Sutter Yuba, it gets referred to review it and decide against anyone, whether or one of the civilians involved. So today, the legal analysis that I've done actually several done by Net 5. Other Yuba-Sutter, both drugs and gangs. Enforcement agency, the DEA, and this year a drug trafficking organization that was moving hundreds of pounds of drugs into Northern California. The DEA and that sufficient evidence on the central that it was time to bring this. They do that. Typically what happens is federally, and all of the minor chain of this network, they end up. So on March the 26th, it was time to bring this. It was going to involve serving 20 search warrants in Net 5. Good day. Clearly, they couldn't accomplish that. This is a huge lift. Investigation to a close. 5 personnel. That day on March the 26th, 1920 Kestrel Court. 60 years old. He'd been a heavy equipment operator at work due to an injury, abuse. For soliciting lewd acts, indecent. He had drug offenses. He was a long-time methamphetamine addict, but the dealer that was at the very between that drug trafficking organization and the users. And that's a lot of what was getting cleaned up. Taking down the central actors and then also making sure that Mr. Oliver Rick, one thing that's not violence whatsoever in his record. This location for it was a low risk because he didn't. I'm going to back up for a picture. Up here has a pin at all the Yuba-Sutter. So there, each one in a plan. Wow, how are they going to take care of time in one. It's like I said, as net 5 itself, hitting all. So looks like this. Net 5 reaches out. Yuba County Police Department in the region, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, PA, Colusa County Sheriff, Yolo County Sheriff. I mean, we're doing this. We need help. Can you send people? Everyone says, we've got your back. And then that to do this work. And so on, we had 15 teams designated search warrants. And there were 2 command posts. So just now, ad hoc teams. I'll give you one example. This in the Yuba County Sheriff's Office. A dog handler assigned to that location. So organization is messy, but it's based on location. Had a thorough review and safety assessment, including things like violence. He had no history of firearms. It's fairly low risk. All 50 did the safety and risk assessments at the matrix. So what happens when they've done a risk assessment? So in this case, you had SWAT members present, SWAT team for a SWAT hit, so to speak. Ad hoc task organization. The 3 tactical teams. So there were 2 SED team, and then the Yuba-Sutter region. These 3 tactical teams. Go back to what in the ops plan was referred to as Kestrel Court with Rick Oliver. 7 law enforcement officers, because they're looking for any peace officers that can help. People from the UBDA's office, because I have peace officers. Sutter County DA's office, Yuba County Sheriff's office. Lieutenant Mercy Garcia. Great officer. It was his. So he went out ahead of time. State risk assessment to look things over. So he that's not noted in any of the plans. Late came back to someone I'm going to call witness 3. Was the registered owner. Was a dangerous guy. Violence. Witness 3. Meeting the matrix and meeting the SWAT. Witness 3. Really bad guy. Really dangerous. Lieutenant Garcia saw that, and we're not going to do a dynamic entry on this. We're going to do. He let. This is our plan, and this is what. This is the day before. Did their research. with witness 3, and they were able to witness 3 had nothing to do with this house in Oliver. Vehicle that had been sitting there, but he had nothing to do with the house. About that, witness 3 had nothing to do with this, or somehow come into possession of a car that was registered to witness 3. So witness 3, not at the house, has nothing to do with the house in hindsight, but at the time, Lieutenant Garcia was really concerned, but Net 5 was confident that he wasn't there. So knowing how Lieutenant Garcia felt, they turned to the tactical teams. And one of the tactical teams only had one site scheduled that morning in Yuba City. It was called Tactical Team 2. So Tactical Team 2 to do the entry, but because we were task organizing lots, the ability to move first. So Net 5 with Tactical 2 provide, and they told him Garcia believes that witness 3 might be. We know that he still lives in this one spot, and he has nothing to do with this residence. So I said, yeah, absolutely. So it consists of agents that are the team leaders. Mallory of the Yuba County Sheriff's Office, and a crisis negotiator, and with all the red and blue lights on it, and all that kind of stuff. In California, we don't typically, before we go into a showing up and making sure you huge truck with the red and blue lights. Yeah, that's so TAC 2. So that's what it contains. The law enforcement officers, anyway, Yuba City Police Department, all embedded in that team. So this is a Kestrel Court that morning. Operators, they wear body to do this job without body armor. And a lot of time patrol deputies type vest that's more to handle certain types of, but SWAT operators rifle rated plates in the front and back. They come in. You can see Officer Rodarte's vest if you want to evidence, but it's up there, and so hardened 10 by 20. And so that's why they do those. He's wearing it. It basically stops at the belly button. Plate carriers and regular vests, and you can see why just from this picture as he's seated. If you had a longer vest coming up over your ears on the sides, throat as you squat or sit. A law enforcement operator trying to, so they do wear their vital organs. It's also designed to let them do the job, move quickly So he's also, let's see if I can get this mouse to work, wearing a body-worn camera, which is up here now, because we're going to see some of the video. And a lot blacked out is because his arm is in front of his camera. He's armed with a radio, eye protection. We make sure that we equip our people. You also notice the huge first aid. That would have been our tactical emergency team. So everyone is. So back to Kestrel Court. Until March 26th, that morning, they were. So they received notice at the morning. We wanted them to do. It was at Kestrel Court. Their first site. They finished that out by the Yuba County Airport. They met with the first team. They met and they talked about the site. They made a plan. They went over everything. And the plan, always in these situations, when you've got something like a Bearcat, is to pull up into the front of the residence and then get on the speaker. Law enforcement, you're there to serve a search warrant, they need to come out. So that's where they plan to actually come through the side gate and not just go to the front door. Practically sound, and I think it was. Right? They breached the gate, they went through the side yard, and you're going to see video on all this later, but I want you to understand. That's when the truck mostly came to. Yuba City police officer Zabala's body-worn camera. You can see the team filing toward the house. So Zabala is one of the last ones off the truck. So they go up to that gate, they wait. Admonitions are being given on the hit a lapse, they breached the gate and went through. So this is the team. Again, this is, and you see Sergeant Mallory here on the right. So you'll notice he's carrying a huge ballistic shield. Like this, they're going to be given one huge ballistic. Job is to provide protection and cover into the house. So you've seen it in the movie, for a hooligan bar and tear it open. But you got a guy with a shield to cover him, handling a rifle. So the breacher, which we're looking at officers. I believe that's a radio antenna, but that's what that is. So they came around the back. Again, you see officer shield, and now that there are windows, training, right? Notice this window on the window is cracked open. The blinds aren't all the way down. Why is that important to me? Is to me because it helps me know the public address system right out front saying, you come outside. Coming around this corner, you'll hear it later on the video. Sneaky. They're wearing full uniform. Right? This is not, again, this is not knock and notice. We're loud. The fact that this window is open and this Oliver is going to be waiting for those officers. You could probably even see them coming. So this is a little further. The second window's open. So as they approach the back door where they're going to make the doors opened up. So with the ramp, right? So the guy with the shield now. So on the video, you're going to see carrying the shield. Basically, all you're going to see is it's covering his camera so that he can get his rifle ready to go into the residence. So they actually 7:49, 44 seconds, 39 seconds after making announcements. So well that comes from case law about give before you go in. You're going to hear that it, again, drum is the first one through that door. Sheriff's office. Guys, we're making sure. Here's the layout of the house, which is it's 1,600 square feet. So they enter through the slider here at the top of the houses. It's only a couple years old, so it's got the open. So 6 with two, or say on Osama bin Laden, where you know exactly. So in these situations, they don't. You are going to go into the master bedroom, and two of you are detail on these because when they come through that back door, they have no idea how many. But they could go through that back door and find 6 people and go right out the window. So that's just not how it works. We have kind of general rules that they follow. One wall, the second guy takes the other wall. So you'll see in the video that decisions have to be made right here at this juncture. To go which way. And if you watch close, because Trump, who's the team leader, he's going to signal for the next guy. And then after doing that, master bedroom. So just as you know, to get into the house and some kitchen counter island, Osmar Rodarte, moment to be the guy that would follow Sergeant. And so you'll, this again is from Officer Zavala's body-worn camera, and it's showing you this moment of time at this junction of hallway. And Sergeant Trum, far left here, you can see he's already entering the master bedroom at this moment. This is Osmar Rodarte right behind him. And then down to the folks that have gone straight, Sergeant Mallory, the other team leader, and I believe Marysville Sergeant Souza is the one here on the right. But again, they're kind of peeling off, going one way or the other, depending on the need in the moment. So we're now looking at a still image from Officer Rodarte's body-worn camera. And his camera is the one that I use for any timeline stuff. You've got 3 different agencies or more on that scene, and their body-worn cameras weren't synchronized on time. So Officer Rodarte's is the one that was used for any entries of timeline, and I had to make adjustments for anyone else, which I used. They used what's called a flashbang in the front of the house as a distraction, and so that's really loud, and so I was able to sync across and figure out whose video was 7 seconds fast or slow relative to Rodarte. But 7:49:53, again, you see mostly Officer Rodarte's arm takes up most of this. See a little circle right here? That's going to be the bottom of the handle of his rifle. And then you can see kind of sticking down, that would be his magazine. In front of him, that's Sergeant Trum. Sergeant Trum's going into the bedroom, 7:49:53. And at this moment, you can hear Rick Oliver say, kind of quietly, "Don't do it, don't do it." So he says that just as Sergeant Trum and Officer Rodarte get into that bedroom, as pictured here. You have to excuse my effort at making a diagram, but here you go. So Oliver, they could kind of see him, but not full on because he's standing behind a stack of storage totes. Yeah, I'm going to show you a picture of that in a minute. You got a dresser here on the far wall with a mirror behind it. You got a big bed in the room, and then you've got some miscellaneous chairs and nightstands and all the usual bedroom type stuff. So they can hear him, "Don't do it, don't do it." But he's behind these totes. So here a second later, 7:49:54. This is again from Officer Rodarte's body-worn camera. And if you look, you can see 1, 2, 3 of these blue storage totes. And if you look carefully, you'll notice there's a black one up on the top. So stacked 4 high, Rick Oliver was behind this. So he had just said, "Don't do it, don't do it." Sergeant Trum, for the 3rd time since he'd entered the residence, yells, "Sheriff's office." At 55, Oliver says it louder, "Don't do it." And you can see, so again, most of the screen is blacked out by Officer Rodarte's arm, but you can see it in green right here. So here's Sergeant Trum's hip right in front of him. So they're still right there, kind of in the threshold of that room. And they both tell him, this is what we train our officers to do, right? There's a guy hiding in the corner, can't see his hands. What am I going to do? "Get your hands, show me your hands." And they both do. Sergeant Trum and then Officer Rodarte, both telling him, "Show us your hands." So they've got a problem at this point. And the problem is that, of course, they can't see him. He's not moving. He's not showing his hands. And so Sergeant Trum, to react to this, he needs to move toward a place where he can get better eyes on Rick Oliver. And so he's going to move toward the center of the room so he can try to look around those totes. That's going to create a problem for the team. And the problem is you got a bathroom back here. So you got an open bathroom. It's not not an arch, but it's an opening. It doesn't have a door. The line for the door here is for a closet that's right across from the sink in the bathroom. But that's a problem because if Sergeant Trum moves into the center of the room, then his back is potentially, there could be danger in the bathroom. So Officer Rodarte does what he's trained to do. And he tells Sergeant Trum, he says, "I got your back." And he moves along the wall to make sure that danger spot, that someone has eyes on it, so that Sergeant Trum can do what he needs to do, focusing on Rick Oliver. We're now at, I think, 58 seconds. So it's been 5 seconds since they've started into the threshold of this ring. So now they're roughly here. Officer Rodarte is checking the bathroom. Sergeant Trum's looking at Oliver. And Sergeant Trum's going to tell him again, "Show me your hands." And then after that, he's going to catch a reflection in this mirror on the dresser. And he's going to see that Rick Oliver is behind those totes. He's got a big revolver. It's pointed at the floor. He's holding it in his right hand. It's pointed at the floor. So at 59, again, this is the view from Officer Rodarte. So you're seeing the door back there. It's to that closet inside the bathroom. But he's peering in there to see what's going on, if anything, in the bathroom. And then a second later, Sergeant Trum sees this reflection, and he yells, "Got a gun, got a gun." And he does what we train our law enforcement officers to do in this situation. He does what we call it step off line. When they see a threat, if you ever watch training at the range, you'll hear the range master yell "threat," and watch the deputy or the officer step to the left or the right before engaging the target. We train it over and over and over. So Sergeant Trum does that. He steps to the left and he yells, "Got a gun, got a gun." And I want to point out to you that Sergeant Trum doesn't shoot Rick David Oliver at that moment. Why? Because the revolver's pointed at the ground, and this is what we train over and over, right? We're in California. De-escalate. Give a warning. Give instructions. And so he does. He's got a gun. He's got a gun. And he steps left. Officer Rodarte spins around right where he's at, back toward the threat. So at 7:50:01, and again, like, I'm going second by second here, but obviously things can overlap 1 second to another. This is the only view we get of Rick Oliver on any of the body-worn cameras while he's still alive. It's hard to catch. In fact, if you just watch the video, you probably miss it. This is one frame. You can see he's wearing like some red shorts. And he's got some white socks on here, and he's bladed toward Officer Rodarte. This is the footboard of the bed, which is kind of unusual. You can see there's like a bedpost here, but the sheet is pulled over the bedpost. Again, most of this is covered up by Officer Rodarte's arm, right? Because he's holding his rifle and he's pointing it. He's spun around. He's pointing it at Rick Oliver. And this is the magazine coming down out of his rifle. So we know that within a second of Sergeant Trum giving that warning and stepping left, Osmar has spun around and has Oliver in his sights. And at 7:50:02, everyone fires. And it's all so on top of each other. I've listened to it at least 100 times. And I can't tell you, like, I hear this person fire first or this person fire second. It is all, the shooting is less than 2 seconds, and it's all over. The officers have fired a collective 10 rounds, at the end of that, less than 2 seconds, and Rick David Oliver is fired 1. I'm going to talk more about the body-worn cameras and Public Records Act requests and what we're prepared to produce under PRA when it comes to video of this. But right up front, here at 7:50:03, as the gunshots are ending, we've obscured. I mean, it's mostly black until you see that Officer Rodarte is falling. And frankly, those children never need to see that. They're 7 and 6, and so I'm taking the stance that balancing the privacy interest of his family and need for transparency, privacy wins. So at that moment, the gunshots, less than 2 seconds, Sergeant Mallory's in the laundry room, because again, they got to search every room, right? He's going to immediately, and you're going to see his video, he's going to immediately leave the laundry room, walk around, and come figure out what's going on, right? And within 4 seconds, and again, his is one of the ones that's 7 seconds faster than Rodarte's clock on the body-worn camera. But 4 seconds after the shooting stops, this is Sergeant Trum in front of him, who's holding the room, because we've just had a critical incident. So what's he doing? He's holding the room until help gets there. So Sergeant Mallory rolls in there in 4 seconds. What's going on? What do you got? Sergeant Trum's going to tell him he's down. And Sergeant Mallory's going to ask, who's down? And so over that period of a few seconds, Sergeant Mallory works into that room, so he's next to Trum so he can see what's going on. And so on the left, you can see the suppressor on the rifle of Sergeant Mallory. And the whole team uses suppressors. It protects their hearing. It doesn't silence things. It just makes it quieter so that maybe they won't, maybe they'll be able to hear when they're old people. And then on the right here, you've got Sergeant Trum. So notice the totes, of course, have fallen because some of them have been shot up. Rick Oliver has fallen down into those totes and sent them kind of sprawling. Well, let me back up. So Sergeant Mallory, Sergeant Trum is going to focus on Officer Rodarte with the help of Deputy Lieutenant Kite from the County Sheriff's Office. He's there in the threshold of the bathroom, and they're going to quickly figure out that he needs to get out of the house to medical care, and they're going to do their best to get him out of that house. Sergeant Mallory is going to move forward to try to help Mr. Oliver. Of course, he doesn't know exactly what he has at this moment, right? He's come into this room. He knows shots have been fired. He knows someone's down. So while the city officer Ernst is covering him, he's going to move forward. He's going to just start throwing those totes, which are full mostly of marijuana. He's going to start throwing those totes across the room, and he's going to find Rick Oliver's dead. They are going to provide attempt medical aid for him, but his autopsy says he dies within seconds. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But as he throws these totes out of the way, he finds a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolver laying on the floor right next to Rick Oliver's body. So we're just in try to secure things mode. So he's going to pick that up. You'll hear him on the video with the gun. And he's going to set it up on the dresser just so that it's not within arm's reach of Rick Oliver, which is a standard thing that they'll do. So that's the basics of what happened. So investigation. Some of the team members were there outside on the perimeter because they were originally tasked with doing the entry of this house and searching this house. So some of them were immediately reassigned to the OIS investigation. And then Chief Investigator Brandon Oakley from the Sutter County DA's office came over to take the lead on the investigation, and he did a really good job. And there's a lot of people we should thank. Yolo and Butte County DA's offices come to mind right away because they immediately called and said, "Can we send people to help with this investigation?" So thankful for that. So the OIS team, they basically froze the house. Once, they call the California Department of Justice. It has a Bureau of Forensic Services that includes a field team, and it's CSI type stuff, right? So they roll out with their big truck, and we let California Department of Justice process the scene and collect all the evidence. That is pretty normal for any time we have one of these officer-involved shootings or even a major homicide, because frankly, none of the departments in the area, maybe Yuba City, do it enough that they've got the expertise to really process a scene well. So DOJ came out to process the scene, and they find 10 cartridge casings from rifles. And some of them are right here under the bed. There's one tucked back on the floor down here, one in the bathroom, but they're basically spread out here in the front of the room, which makes sense because Officer Rodarte and Sergeant Trum are both in that area when they fired the rifles. So here's a photo from the Department of Justice just showing you, kind of what this looked like in reality. You've got shake spilled all over the floor. They're hard to see. There's a shell casing here. You can kind of see the brass. There's another one over here. There's evidence. Markers are marking them. Another one back here in the bathroom. Another one under this chair. So again, they collect 10. These are the rifles that Sergeant Trum and Officer Rodarte used, and those were collected by Department of Justice same day. Those cartridge casings, the rifles, they get sent off, or they bring them to their lab, and just like CSI, they get exemplar casings, cartridge casings, and bullets, and they do analysis. They do comparison at the microscopic level. And so they were able to tell us definitively that 6 of the cartridge casings were fired from Sergeant Trum's rifle, and 4 of them were fired from Officer Rodarte's. That Smith & Wesson revolver, they did the same thing here. If you look, so there's a revolver. It's not a semi-automatic. It doesn't throw the spent casing out of it. So the spent casing is still here in the firearm. And if you look really close, you can see the dent in the primer from the one round that was fired. So again, that's how we know that only 1 out of the 6 were fired by Rick Oliver. Department of Justice also does what we call trajectory rods. And again, this is all, we don't assume what happened going into this. This is an objective investigation into what happened because the public deserves to know. And if an officer ever does commit a crime, they're going to get prosecuted for it. And so we don't assume that they're innocent going into it. We do an investigation. And so that's what you see here. The photo on the right is a pink trajectory rod running through, or actually on top of the footboard of the bed. The round went through and then kind of skimmed a little furrow at the top of the bedpost and then continued on. And in the background, you can see the opening to that bathroom. So given that rod's trajectory, you can pretty safely say that that one was fired by Officer Rodarte. This is the wall behind where Oliver was hiding, behind those totes. So you see 1, 2, 3, and there's a 4th one down here that was much harder to figure out trajectory because it went through a little step ladder first. And that's why there's like some gray splatter because like some of the metal came off onto the wall. But again, like letter D here looks like it's from the direction of the bathroom, whereas C and E look like more toward the bedroom, the entrance. This is just a sample of the kind of investigation that they do to try to figure out what happened. And based on that analysis, This is essentially what happened. Officer Rodarte spun around right where he was. Sergeant Trum stepped to the left. And Sergeant Trum, when he was interviewed, said that he saw the flash from Oliver's firearm before he fired. But this happened so fast. You're going to see when you see the video. But this is roughly the locations of everyone when they shot. So Rick Oliver had an autopsy performed on his body, and he died from 7 gunshot wounds. Some of those wounds included his heart and lungs. And again, the findings of the pathologist were that he died within seconds. They recovered from his body 11 projectile fragments, and rifle bullets tend to fragment, at least this caliber. They tend to fragment when they hit things. So you don't really get intact bullets. You get fragments from bullets. Those got sent to the Department of Justice. They were able to compare them to examples fired from the rifles that were used. They weren't able to match any of them to the rifles, which is normal because fragments are usually so small you can't get enough microscopic comparison to verify. But they were able to see enough that they could actually rule out one rifle or the other for some of them because of the basic characteristics of the barrel, because they had different lands and grooves, different rifling inside the barrels of the rifles. So looking at those, they were able to say for some of the fragments, this did not come from Sergeant Trum's rifle, and looking at some of them, they're able to say this did not come from Sergeant Rodarte's rifle. So they can't say it's a match because it's too small to get a definitive match. But given that we only have 2 shooters, this tells us that both Sergeant Trum and Officer Rodarte fired rounds that hit Rick David Oliver. The other big thing from the autopsy is there at the bottom. Those are the toxicology findings. So he had a little bit of alcohol on board, but the big one is he had methamphetamine on board. And more than I've ever seen in my career on someone that's not already dead from methamphetamine intoxication. 5,000 nanograms per milliliter. I thought it was a typo initially because that was so high, but we confirmed it, and it's accurate. So to say that Mr. Oliver was high on methamphetamine would be an understatement. He was really high on meth, and I'll tell you, in all the officer-involved shootings that I've reviewed, which I think I'm at 10 now, all but one of them, the civilian subject has been really high on methamphetamine. No one this high, but 1,200 nanograms per milliliter, 800, and right in the toxicology report, they tell us, there's a quote from there, blood levels between 200 and 600 nanograms per milliliter have been reported. People who exhibit violent, irrational behavior. So this is my personal experience from having reviewed officer-involved shootings, is they tend to have that kind of level of methamphetamine in their system, these people that end up being shot by law enforcement. These photos are taken by the Department of Justice at the bottom. They found about 6 grams of methamphetamine on Mr. Oliver's bed along with pipe. They found, I think it was about 15 pounds of marijuana, but it's not the marijuana that leads to this kind of behavior. It's methamphetamine. So don't let anyone ever tell you that meth is some kind of a harmless drug. When 9 out of 10 officer-involved shootings involve an individual super high on meth, it's a big issue. All right, so Officer Rodarte also had an autopsy. A bullet was a single .357 Magnum hollow point bullet was recovered from the inside of his right hip. Over in this area. That was sent to the Department of Justice. They compared it to an exemplar fired from the .357 Magnum recovered from the room, and it matched. So for sure, the bullet that was removed from Officer Rodarte during his autopsy was fired from the gun that's on the floor next to Oliver. when they made entry. He died from a gunshot wound to his lower left abdomen. So that round, probably one of the worst things that I've had to do in reviewing this case and all the evidence is looking at the autopsy photos. And I can tell you definitively that that round was below the line of his belly button. It entered in the left, kind of the left flank, but also right there at the front. So it was going from left to right, front to back, slightly downward, according to the autopsy. And again, having reviewed those photos, it was definitely below the line of his belly button. Why is that important? No one wears vests below the belly button, except for maybe EOD, bomb squad guys. You'll see them dressed up like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, but they don't have to move fast. They can waddle up to their project and do what they have to do. So that round hit and severely damaged his left iliac artery. And so your main blood artery comes down through your spine and it branches out. We call it the aorta, which branches left and right, and then goes a little lower, and there's an inner and outer left iliac artery. The outer one, I think it's the outer one, could be the inner. One of the two becomes the femoral artery that runs through your leg. So we're talking upstream of your femoral artery, and in fact, the damage was below or above the split even. So, why is that important? Well, it tells us something. Short of there being an operating room in that house with a surgical team that was briefed ahead of time that they were about to have a patient that had a severely damaged left iliac artery, so that they could immediately go in and try to clamp it, there was nothing anyone could do to save Osmar's life. They did everything they could. They got him out of that house. The firefighters, the EMTs, by county, ride out, Adventist ride out. They tried. I think it's 8:40, 8:45. They pronounce him dead. They tried. But the reality is, he, within a couple minutes, had lost so much blood, he was dead. So legal analysis. Homicide. What's a homicide? It's the killing of one human being by another human being. Homicides can be unlawful, like murder, and they can be unlawful. A murder is killing of a human being by another one with malice aforethought, but you can have lawful homicide. The case in point, self-defense. That would be a lawful homicide. The evidence shows that both Officer Rodarte, Sergeant Trump, shot Rick David Oliver. Fact. They both hit it. They both contributed to his death. Did they commit a homicide? Yes. Yes, they did. The next step in the legal analysis is to look and see whether it's justified. So Penal Code Section 835A talks about self-defense for peace officers in deadly force situations, and this is what it says. They've got to reasonably believe, based on the totality of all the circumstances, that the deadly force is necessary to defend against an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer, so that'd be self-defense, or another, which would be defense of others. So the analysis of that, first off, we just have to point out, right, this is a team going into someone's castle. Number one, a judge, based on probable cause, signed a search warrant to allow that team to go into that house. So they had permission to be there, they had lawful authority to be there, and this is why a lot of those facts I've gone over were so important, right? The big truck, the announcements over the PA, the fact that they're going around the corner of that house being noisy. They're wearing uniforms. They're wearing patches. They're yelling sheriff's office, police department, search warrant. They're doing all the things that they're supposed to do to let everyone inside know this is law enforcement. We have permission to be here. Which means under, I think it's Penal Code Section 834A, Rick Oliver had a duty to not resist, a legal duty to not resist. He's supposed to lay down, put his hands up, and let himself be taken into or detained so that the warrant can be served. So therefore, the officers in this situation had a right to self-defense. That's number one. And then basically, you look at the necessity of deadly force. Did they really believe that they needed to use deadly force in the situation? And then was that belief reasonably objective? And the answer for both is yes. So Sergeant Trump lived to tell about it, and he gave an interview, waived Miranda, gave a voluntary statement, told what happened. He'd seen the revolver, he saw the flash, he heard the boom. He thought that Oliver was trying to kill him or his teammate. Honestly, like Sergeant Trump didn't know who was in the room with him. He knew he had a teammate in the room. But he didn't know who it was in the chaos of everything. So definitely, he's told us that he believed this was necessary. Officer Rodarte's actions of firing basically simultaneously at Oliver, I think, speak toward his subjective belief. And then was it objectively reasonable? I don't think there is a person in this room, maybe in the state, that would say it's not objectively reasonable, but it absolutely is. Rick David Oliver knew law enforcement was coming in to serve a search warrant in his house, or should have known. And he chose to lay and wait, hiding behind those totes with a loaded .357 Magnum. And then he chose, even after, right, they get in there and they're, show me your hands, giving him lawful orders, maybe 10, 15 feet away from him, dressed in the full uniform, doing things that law enforcement do. I mean, this has been some kind of vigilante group. They're not going to say, show me your hands, right? It's the cops that do that. Why? Because we ask them to for our community. So it was objectively reasonable. So, the conclusion on this one is easy. They're justified. This was justifiable self-defense by Sergeant Trump and Osmar Rodarte against Rick David Oliver. And I'll note that given how high he was on methamphetamine, who knows what was going through the head of Rick David Oliver in that moment, because the literature will tell us that people can be basically out of their minds. But Penal Code Section 834A, for good reason, says that they know or reasonably should know, because getting high is not an excuse to not knowing that it's cops coming through your door. All right, we're almost to the video. So I want to talk about the Public Records Act requests that everyone submitted for the video and the decisions that we've made with regard to these. So there are two videos that show the shooting. Osmar's is in the room, and it's the only body camera in the room. Sergeant Trump wasn't wearing his that day. He forgot his cell phone at home. He was halfway to check in when he realized he'd forgotten his phone, and he had a choice to make. He could go back home and get his phone, or he could go by the office to pick up his body-worn camera off of the charger. He chose to go get his phone. So we don't have a body-worn camera from Sergeant Trump from that morning, but Osmar's is in the room. There's a second video that shows the shooting, but is not in the room, and that's Deputy Tenekite's. Deputy Tenekite's the last guy in the line for Tactical 2 who stays outside, basically covering the backyard to make sure no one's coming into the house from out there. And his body-worn camera shows those 3 or 4 rifle rounds that come through the wall. So then we've got video from people that are in the house at the time of the shooting. So this would be all the other members of TAC 2. And then there's a lot of people at the scene. So everyone that's in the house or Deputy Tenekite who's right outside it, you either see the shooting or you can definitely hear the shooting. There's video, there's body-worn camera on some of the people that are at the scene but not going in. And frankly, the only thing that would have on it are the medical care afterwards and the aftermath. And it's not relevant, and we're choosing to not release those because they don't show the critical incident. But everyone that was in the house, we are going to release video. And so you can see the names of everyone that was in there. So when I say we're going to give up video, what video are we going to give up? There's a case recently out of Roseville. The 3rd DCA just made a ruling a few months ago about PRAs and videos of officer fault shootings specifically. And so that really provided some guidance for us as to what was due. And in that case, they originally asked, they said, we want everything from the time the officers arrive until the scene is secure. It was essentially what they were asking for. And Roseville PD didn't provide that. They provided a far more limited amount of video. So we're going to do that from the time they arrive. For the people that end up in that house, you're going to have that video from the moment the truck stops. The case with the 3rd DCA, they talked about post-shooting video often being irrelevant because it doesn't provide context. So all the videos go through at least the shooting. You were able to see what happened, what led up to it. You get the why. And this is, for the public and for transparency. That's what it's at the end of the day. That's what it's about. Why did these state officials with the authority of the state use deadly force on another individual? There's one exception to that that we've chosen to make, and that is Sergeant Mallory. So Sergeant Mallory, as I went over earlier, he's the first one to that room after the shooting. He's the one who secures the gun. And so we've decided that we're going to release that to you under Public Records Act request. It goes all the way until he's found and secured the gun. I'm going to tell you up front, it's been redacted. There's been a blur put over Mr. Oliver's body out of respect for his sister, for his family, and some of the audio's been redacted. And we didn't try to do anything cute. It's just in some places the audio's not there. And the audio that's not there is Osmar Rodarte. He was conscious for at least a handful of seconds. And he was professional, letting his team know that he was down. And his 6- and 7-year-old sons never need to hear that. So that portion of the audio has been redacted out to protect the privacy of his family. And we've done the blur. So that will, we've got a box or a bucket of videos that will be ready right after this. So you'll have that video. I'm not going to play it, that portion of Mallory's video, because I think it's just voyeuristic. I mean, I understand the desire to see the aftermath, to know that law enforcement did the right thing. And so that's why we chose to release Sergeant Mallory's video, finding him again. Okay. So I'm going to play the video here in a minute. Rachel, if you want to, don't play it yet, but you can start to get that ready. Fair warning, obviously, this is not a video to watch lightly. It's pretty terrible stuff. This is a produced video where we have tried to put together for the public some of the things that you learned today. It's still almost 8 minutes, so shorter than me. But we'll go ahead and we'll play it. I'll have a few more remarks when it's done. Okay. I'll have a few concluding remarks, but this time I'll take questions. I'm also happy at later times. Right.
Can you explain one more time why you started didn't have wide on camera?
The bottom line is, so they keep those at the office on chargers that download those cameras. It's that's just how it works with body worn cameras. And so he needed to go by the office before he went to the location where everyone was meeting to pick up his body worn camera that morning. And he left his house and got halfway to where they were meeting, and he realized he didn't have his phone, and he made a bad choice. He went back to his house to get his phone rather than taking the time to go by the office because he didn't have time to do both.
For the absence of this camera, that was a challenge with the investigation.
No, not to the criminal investigation. There was ample evidence of what happened inside. Would have been nice to have it, of course. That's why we have them wear them. But the investigation was hindered by it. All right, who else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So those totes, the bins.
Yes.
Were those that was full of marijuana?
I believe most of them were full of marijuana.
Can you just talk about the investigation itself, how long it took, any challenges you all faced, and what brought us to where we are today?
Well, it's normally a full-time job for 5 or so investigators for a number of weeks after an incident like this. And then after that, it slows down a little bit, and as we identify things that need to be followed up on, just to give you an idea, they go through the neighborhood knocking on doors. What did you hear? What did you see? They go and they find relatives of Rick David Oliver, you know, trying to see if there's an explanation. It takes time to get the autopsies done. It takes sometimes a really long time to get the autopsy reports back, which was the case in this case. I don't remember how many months it was, but it was quite a long time before we got the actual autopsy reports. So they're doing a lot initially, and then things slow down. So how do we get to today? A while ago, they finished with the investigation portion, and the officer involved shooting investigation team, the YS team, they bring me a binder, and they say, here's everything, all the reports, all the body-worn cameras, all the photos, and then I take these so seriously, and we're a small county, I review them personally, going through every last video, every last report. There's nothing that I don't see that's part of the investigation, which makes it take longer, and is also just terrible, and frankly, in a case like this, to have to review this kind of evidence.
Can you talk a little bit more about how high he was on meth? Maybe kind of break it down or compare it to something for people who aren't familiar with those kind of metrics.
Okay, so it's fairly normal to have cases where people are high, where they're in the hundreds. 200 to 600 is sort of where the medical literature says you start to see irrational violent behavior. 200 to 600 nanograms per milliliter. So 5,000 is off the charts. So frame of reference, there was another officer involved shooting in Hallwood I think it was last year, and I think that gentleman had about 1,200 nanograms per milliliter, which at the time was the highest I'd ever seen. And so this is off the charts. And if you look at the two numbers, the amphetamine and methamphetamine, that doesn't mean he's taking two different drugs. The methamphetamine number is the meth in his system that still needs to be processed, and the amphetamine is the metabolized part that his body has already processed. So I think that number was in the 500s. So it shows that high a number is indicative of more recent use, because the 5,000 is so much bigger than the 500. If someone had used a while ago, the amphetamine number would be higher and the meth lower. But Mr. Oliver was seriously high on methamphetamine.
It's been 6 months from this incident. What's the biggest takeaway you want to take from these findings?
I told myself I wasn't going to cry. I want you to pray and remember. Osmar had a wife, 2 little boys, 7 and 6. Obviously, he had more family than that. He had a law enforcement family, and there are a lot of people that are struggling with the shoulda and the coulda. You can keep Sergeant Trum in your prayers. There's probably not a day that hasn't gone by he hasn't thought about, what if I pulled the trigger just a second earlier? But he did what he was trained to do. This isn't Fallujah, where they can just kick the door down and shoot anyone that's on their feet. This is law enforcement in America, and we value the lives of our citizens, and we expect from our law enforcement officers they treat people with dignity. And that's why we tell them to try to de-escalate. That's why we tell them to get warnings before they shoot someone. So Sergeant Trum, saw Rick Oliver with a firearm pointed at the ground. He didn't pull the trigger. And he did what we expect of him. That's got to be a struggle. And it's not just him. It's everyone that was involved in this entire operation. that can imagine some regret. What if we just hadn't done this location? Or the first team that was there who saw Witness Three's car and said, "Oh, we're not going to do that. We think Witness Three's in there." The survivor's guilt is real. It's real. So, biggest takeaway: Sergeant Trump, Osmar Rodarte, and their team, they did what we trained them to do that day, and they're heroes. Anything else? We can do more in a little bit if you want.
Has this incident prompted any changes to how an operation like this might be conducted?
So, the criminal investigation is the first step. That's my responsibility to decide whether any criminal charges come out of something like this. Now that this is done, in fact, I think Sheriff Anderson hasn't even received a copy of the report yet. Sorry, I meant to email you this morning. And Chief Nevada. So now that this is done, there'll be an administrative review and also a policy review, because anytime you have an incident, not just when an officer dies, but anytime you have an incident, you can ask yourself, what could we have done better? What did we do well? What can we learn for the future? And so I know that'll happen, but it's not my role to do that for them. Because again, the scope of my piece in this is the criminal investigation. That's a good question.
So the 10 shots that require that, however, how many actually struck him?
7. He had 7 gunshot wounds, and if you look at some of the math, there's 4 holes in the wall, and I'm telling you, he got hit 7 times, and they only fired 10. Some of the rounds probably went through Mr. Oliver before they hit the wall. So the math doesn't work, but it's because you can have some rounds that cause a gunshot wound and then exit. Thank you for taking time to be here. We've really appreciated our media market with everything that's happened since March. This has been a really difficult thing for everyone. So we appreciate that you are shining a light on this, not just for Osmar, but also because it's how we function as a democracy. So thank you. If you think of stuff later, I'm happy to do follow-up.
If you want those, that footage, you
Yeah.
Watching the live coverage from Yuba-Sutter.live of the Yuba County District Attorney's report, the death of Osmar Rodarte, Marysville police officer. And we've been live from the Yuba County Supervisor Chambers at 8th and J Streets here in Marysville. I'm Ted Langdell, and we will be replaying the entire news conference later today. Have to figure out what time we'll post that information. We had a bad connection early in the news conference, but we reestablished a good connection, and you've been able to watch pretty much uninterrupted for most of this. So we, again, will be replaying this entire news conference later today, so stay tuned for that. We also have a replay of another event that happened last week, last Thursday. What happened during the Hotel Marysville Site Town Hall? Watch our augmented replay at 7 p.m. Tuesday, September 30th, right here on Yuba-Sutter.live. presented by Comfort Keepers of Yuba-Sutter and Nevada counties. People spoke during the community input session, offering their ideas about what to do after hearing about what's happening with the EPA cleanup grant application and debris removal process. They heard next steps for marketing the flattened hotel Marysville property, how the city is identifying potential developers and revitalization opportunities. You can still comment using this QR code. Shoot it with your phone and add your ideas. What did other people say? Watch our augmented replay at 7 p.m. Tuesday, September 30th, right here on Yuba-Sutter.live, presented by Comfort Keepers of Yuba-Sutter and Nevada counties. The Hotel Marysville Site Town Hall replay, a special presentation here on Yuba-Sutter.live.
Yuba-Sutter.live, it's the truth that comes through.
And again, Ted Langdell, we are here at the Yuba County Supervisors Chambers at 8th and J in Marysville, where we have been hearing Yuba County District Attorney Clint Curry deliver his district attorney's report on the death of Officer Osmar Rodarte. We saw some video earlier. We saw a very complete report from Clint Curry. And we will be replaying the entire news conference later today at a time to be announced, possibly as late as 5 or 6 o'clock. This has been an hour and a half right now, so we'll probably make that determination with what we have to do to get the replay ready and then announce a time. This has been a special report from Yuba-Sutter.live.
Yuba-Sutter.live, it's the truth that comes through.
If you'd like to see more reports like this, you can certainly take advantage of our little link that we have at the bottom of the video. And you can support what we do by clicking on the link and making a contribution, a one-time contribution, or even a recurring one, as a number of people do here. So this has been an unsponsored presentation, one that we do because we believe the community needs to know what's happening. Thanks again, and again, coming up live tonight, or I should say later tonight, we have the town hall about what to do about the Marysville hotel site. So we hope that you'll tune in for that as well. That'll start at 7 o'clock, and we'll have the replay of this news conference coming up at a time to be announced, probably around 5:30 or so tonight. Thank you again, and we hope to see you later this afternoon.
Yuba-Sutter.live, it's the truth that comes through.